So, party peoples out there, it's Roy Carter from Wrecktitution Media, and yeah, just pretty crazy the last little bit with all the Antifa Chaz, or Alcatraz, as I like to call it, but I guess they've renamed it to Chop, or the Chop Shop. So, good luck for anybody there who believes in having like any kind of sense of, freedom and not having to worry about getting their asses kicked and whatnot. So it's kind of messed up what's been going on with the whole situation with Justin Trudeau. I guess he tried to get a seat at the Security Council, and it's weird how he apparently he's been sucking up to them for the last 4 years. So it's as soon as he got elected, he put in to be on this council, because obviously that's what he was doing, looking out for his career, because that's what he had planned. So I guess maybe this might be because of the fact that it's actually kind of interesting with Justin Trudeau, because for some reason, he's completely cowed to China, but without actually completely cowing to China, because with the whole extradition that went through to with the Meng Zhu, or whatever her name was, from the Huawei whole debacle. They ended up sending her to the States, so she's, I think they sentenced her or whatnot and tried, so all that jazz for, I guess there was some sort of software that was either being ripped off or sold to the Iranians, so I guess because of the trading with the enemy clause and all the sanctions they have there, that kind of put her in the hot seat, so we did kind of eventually cave into that, but there was a whole thing with John McCallum having to resign and how kind of admitted that China does put pressure. And obviously there's been a lot of stuff up here in Canada where there's been exposés, there's been whistleblowers for people in Five Eyes agencies that have just said that China has completely taken over or has access to a lot of the stuff, and all the amount of hacking and stuff is usually caused by them when they want to know certain things. And there's also a lot of pressure that they've put on everything from journalists. They've put dead cats on their cars. They've done a lot of weird shit here in Canada with because they do have a lot of people that are actual Chinese agents, or are people that bring over certain types of money, and they also have weird kind of Chinese funded places where pregnant Chinese women go, and they go have their baby and then they become Canadian citizens. So I think they're starting to look into that stuff. So it's kind of interesting because I mean, as much as I dislike Justin Trudeau or whatnot, it's kind of weird how he's caved into China, because he's even said many times before how he appreciates China and he likes their system, which obviously a trust fund kid who's never really had a real job or a real friendship, or anybody who hasn't been in a tight elitist kind of group with the Mulroonies and all those idiots that run the entertainment gulag up here in Canada. It's kind of interesting, because I just wish that people would kind of look more into philosophy and looking into objective truths and stuff. But at the same time, it's just one of those things where there's that gap between, safety and freedom, and then there's that constant battle between, what we're gonna say here, responsibility and vice. That's always kind of the things that make us kind of choose certain political institutions or certain values that we either say left, right, or anti-authoritarian or authoritarian. There's so many different ways you can go on that, but most people are just kind of trapped in this two-dimensional way of thinking about left-right paradigm and all the stuff that goes with both of it. I notice there's usually a lot of I don't know, it's there's a lot of arguments to be making. I've been watching a lot of Stefan Molyneux, and I've also been watching Canadian Libertarian and Critical Thinker and Chase the Patriot and Rebel. And there's a bunch of different different channels. I like to get different opinions and stuff like that, and it's good to get that kind of variety, because Aristotle and Socrates and that whole kind of when you look at the Greeks, they were always saying that the best way to dismantle other people's arguments or figure out what works and what you believe in is to like argue their points, see their what they're talking about, and whether or not it actually makes sense in the real world. And that there's a lot to be said about that, because I mean most people are usually used to just like the what they see in reality. Most people just see a corrupt paradigm, no matter, usually, like, well, it's kind of funny because people in the States are like, oh, if only we had more parties aside from the Libertarian Party. And I've said this in many videos before, but I mean here in Canada we have many different parties, and people usually stick between the main two parties. I mean, you get like other provincial, like the Bloc Québécois, which are popular in Quebec and stuff, but they have like a weird system over there. And I mean, it's kind of interesting how, like, obviously a lot of people have criticized Trudeau because he's had a lot of, there's been a lot of globalist connections that have operated out of Quebec. I mean, if you just look at just the history of the whole, I'm trying to remember his name, but Maurice Strong, yeah. That's somebody there, if you look into his life, and also with the Power Corporation and the Desmarais family, and how like they've pretty much launched political careers of the original Trudeau at the Montreal Power Corporation headquarters. And they've also had influential dealings with Paul Martin. Jean Chrétien actually married into the Desmarais family. And a lot of people aren't even aware of the Desmarais connections. Paul Desmarais Sr. actually passed away not too long ago, but they've passed it throughout their family, so the institution still stands, and a lot of people don't even understand that they have ties to a lot of different institutions in Canada, including, we had, I'm trying to say it was like Giesecke or Giesecke, and Devrient or whatnot was like a German law firm that dealt with the printing of our money, which is kind of weird because a lot of people, even Flaherty, I think, or was it the finance minister, I think, that passed away or whatnot. He was somebody asked him where the Canadian money was actually printed, and he said it was at the mint, but that's not actually the truth. They print the coins there, and they mint the coins there and stuff like that, but it's printed by pretty much just like a private institution that's not even it's not even accountable to anything in Canada. They can do pretty much what they want, and you're not even allowed to find out the people who are making money off of it, which is pretty much a guaranteed thing. Those are the people that are the insiders, the ones that they're making money regardless. They're the ones that the incentive for them to make money is for people to keep, and governments in general, to keep printing as much money as possible here in the West, because we've gotten way too comfortable with this whole kind of central banking system, and we allowed the principle to be completely destroyed. Here in Canada, it was 1974 with the amendment to the Bank of Canada Act, and I've mentioned that also in many videos too. So it's just the whole kind of like central banking thing. Like, no matter how much our government spends, and like the thing is, we're paying off so much debt, the serviceable debt, all the taxes that they're getting in, and now, I mean, with the shutdown, they're spending more money than they're bringing in, and there's pretty much every economist, everybody's saying if this goes on longer, it's not going to be a good thing, and what we're holding out for a few cases here and there. Overall, people that have died from like the same amount of the flu, pretty much. Like, it's sad that it's out there, but I don't think that, and just the social programming is crazy. And I'm seeing, like, I think it's getting to everyone, and I'm the kind of guy where, like, hey, I'm just ranting, doing like a rant every now and then, on the videos, because it's really hard. I mean, here in Canada, and other places too. I mean, in the States, there's a bit of a fight going on still. I mean, it looks like they have, some spark going on there of liberty and freedom. But I mean, look at like Trump. Apparently, these Republican judges that even Bush appointed. But obviously, I think this is why I agree with Alex Jones, because he was saying how Bush appointed him, like everybody was saying that they were going to be for conservative Republican values. And obviously they weren't, because they were appointing judges that are very left-leaning and globalist controlled pretty much. And unfortunately, when they really want something done, it gets done. They completely, I guess, made it so that I guess they can remove religious freedoms from actually going to, because they took it to the Supreme Court for the people that aren't able to go to church and whatnot. And some states have kind of like eased it up, but obviously the states where there's been Democrat run hellholes, they've been kind of more on the left. They've been going more authoritarian than they have ever with the right. I mean, all right. There's a lot of states that are actually kind of more towards getting everything open now and trying to get businesses, and it's just all these federal mandates and people who are on the left that are like giving the pressure on the Republicans. So it's just this whole, I don't know, it's just kind of a really kind of not a good way to start the whole kind of election cycle. I mean, it's kind of funny, like, what was it, like 2 weeks ago, anybody who was trying to protest to say, hey, we need to get back to work, this is, like, this virus is bad, yeah, but it's not to the point where we need to shut down society or whatnot, or if we allocate our resources so we're focusing more on the elderly people and whatnot and taking care of them and making sure they're not getting infected because they're the ones most at risk. But it's weird how, like, they completely they demonized any kind of immune system boosting, which everybody in the medical community, there's tons of people and doctors and nurses that were speaking out against it. We've seen a lot of different nurses that have even said in like the States and here in Canada, there's been, like almost no, well, I mean, I haven't watched a lot of mainstream media stuff here in Canada. It's just because I like the alternative media so much more, and I get more accurate information from like other people who are alternative media but have different viewpoints. Because usually, if you sort them out, I mean, there's tons of conspiracy theories and dark rabbit holes and weird stuff you can get into. I mean, you want to start talking about weird, like, levels of reality kind of crap and, going down that Pizzagate Podesta email hole and whatnot. But, I mean, certain things definitely need to be addressed. And, I mean, if you look at how Epstein was able to run a Mossad and FBI and MI6, run honeypot operation for Hollywood's and like political elite, like the A-list of A-listers, and we don't get a proper real investigation out of it. What they did, like a thing, I guess they did an Epstein documentary, because that's how the mainstream media does it, on a streaming, either Netflix or whatnot, because obviously you're not going to get the real you're not going to get any information regarding Netflix, anything that might connect to the Democratic Party, make them look bad. But it's funny because you always see like the movies where it'll be like, I guess they had like on Amazon, they had some movie. Apparently it was really good with Helen Hunt, even though her face is like cracking from all the surgeries, I guess. I don't know. Or maybe it's just age and, time doesn't really go too well with those people for 30 years. Oh man, you just got that picture in your mind, but when you see them, I mean, that's the thing about aging. We're only getting older, and the people from the 90s and the 2000s or whatnot are just getting older now. So there's only so many surgeries that can keep that stuff from falling out. But anyway, so they have it so that there's like, the police guy is like the serial like kid rapist or whatnot, like gets killed at the end, because of course it's got to be a white male dad figure who's a cop, because we have to effectively attack everything that's male and in roles of people that would actually be protecting instead of But of course, if it was really well written, my mom was like really into it, so good on her. But yeah, no, it's just one of those things where it's been crazy. It's definitely been a polarization, and I mean, I guess even there's been different people that have been, I guess they want to do a July 1 Canada Day rally at Ottawa, and definitely more power to them. If I had a vehicle or like a way to get up there, I'd consider it. That, and also I've got like a screwed up spine, so there's only like a limited time I could actually really do anything, so that kind of limits me from doing anything fun. But at the same time, I definitely have supported a lot of people, and that's what I like to do. I like to go to other people's channels and just kind of give them like a, hey man, thumbs up, do what, keep on giving her, because there's there's not that many alternative and like honest voices out there. You know, I mean, obviously people have their own opinions, and it was kind of funny because I was watching Canadian Libertarian his stream yesterday. I even chipped in. I was like, hey man, you know, like more power to him, because he was saying how, you know, like he's been having a bit of a, and I even put some questions in there because for me it's like, yeah, it's cool, the whole like libertarian aspect of things where, you know, but the whole libertarian movement itself, there's a lot of people on the left and the right, so there's different variations and interpretations of it. And it's also another thing too, trying to convince a regular normie that kind of seems in the whole left and right narratives. It's really hard to get people out of that, because people are so programmed into, you know, always, you know, kind of like leaning more towards this whole socialist communist kind of left leaning, you know, it's one of those things where people get sucked into it thinking that they're doing the right thing, but it ends up turning into like a really kind of race-based pyramid hierarchy of what you can say and what you can think, and you know, it's not an equality kind of thing, where I'm kind of more of like libertarian values is less authoritarian. Like I'm all for a lot of the people that are, you know, that are want to limit government and want to, you know, especially here in Canada, like it's gotten to such a point where like the spending and just the bloated bureaucracy is just ridiculous. We need to like cut through with it with a chainsaw, but at the same time keep the very skeletal structures of society in place that we've, you know, established have worked many times through Western civilization, through, you know, it's just the way, you know, like even with the whole kind of technocracy rising and all that crap, and the, you know, the fact that we've both the left and the right, no matter which country you've lived in, for the past 20, 30 years, the main, ever since like they started doing the NAFTA deals and all that stuff that was really one-sided, you know, it was designed pretty much to, you know, and the evidence has been clear over the years that it has been globalist UN agendas that have, you know, practically pushed the opening of China, so that we use that as like the global production for like this global one world financial order, which is what they wanted to do with the TPP. I mean, we're already in it here in Canada, I think, and I'm not too sure if they've completely ratified it, because there was, I think it was about 6 months ago, I phoned up the dairy, what was it? Yeah, the dairy board, and asked them if they were taking in U.S. milk or whatnot, or if they had any concerns. I guess Trudeau has kind of like put his foot down, because he, with this whole kind of signing on the USMCA, there's been, from what I gather, there have been like health questions because of the U.S. uses only in about, I think about 9 to 10% of their like dairy cows. They use this thing called Posilac or BGH growth hormones, which like it's kind of weird, because like if you have good dairy producing cows, then they're gonna produce a shit ton of milk. But this thing, what it does is that it gives them like, it gets them to the point where they're producing a little bit more milk than what they're supposed to, but it also gives them a risk of infection to like mastitis, and you know, there's a little bit of health concerns there. So I think I remember another weird thing too is that I've been trying to get a local representative here in Woodstock. It's hard to talk to them, because like I managed to, they had like a barbecue thing where I was talking to them around like the election time, and you know, I didn't really have a chance to talk to him, because he was like, oh yeah, well I got a couple seconds, and I'm like, oh okay, well I was talking to him, but then all of a sudden somebody else came over that like knew him from like, you know, young, when he was young or whatnot, so I was trying to like have a good conversation with him, let him know that I was a libertarian and that I was voting PPC at that point, because that was the federal election. And you know, there's definitely, you know, Canadian Libertarian, he's kind of interesting, because he was kind of ranting, and you know, I do see where he's coming from about this whole banning Antifa thing with Mad Maxine, but at the same time, like, you know, it's, you got to look at it from a reality aspect of things. I mean, I looked into the Libertarian Party with Tim Moen federally, and like, they're interesting and stuff like that, but a lot of those people were like really kind of selling the whole leftist, you know, they were really not on the free speech bandwagon for, you know, and obviously there's the whole thing about, you know, they're talking about, well, you could just go onto a different platform, but like we've seen now that it's a total Orwellian nightmarish kind of like they're, not only have they like attacked Gab for like, I mean, yeah, okay, there's right wing people on there. There's like neo-Nazis and shit like that. But there's also a lot of people on there that are there for, free exchange of ideas, or different channels that they can use in a Twitter like sort of way where people don't get as banned. But then there was the whole kind of thing with Andrew Torba and his kind of thing with the anti-porn crusade, which pissed a lot of people off because he was starting to ban people and kind of get a little authoritative. But it's just one of those things. It's like the practicality and in theory, principle. Like, in theory, you can make something like awesome, like, oh yeah, I love free speech or whatnot, but then they'll be like, oh no, somebody's like putting up like, like movies or whatnot that are copyrighted, and all of a sudden you're getting like Hollywood, giving the main company like a whole bunch of cease and assist, oh, we've seen this here that you have to take this down or else we're gonna sue your ass and stuff like that. It's ridiculous, there's a lot of things that come into play that make it kind of, to the point where a lot of places are like using third-party platforms to do like Discuss and stuff like that, or Discuss or whatever, I guess is the way I don't know how they pronounce it, but it's almost on every different thing there. But I mean, still at the same way, it's there's definitely been a poisoning of the well, in my opinion, for what I'm seeing for like places, especially mainstream media. Mainstream media now is like, for anything that looks like it could be possibly controversial, they turn comments off all the time. And in a lot of articles, opinion articles and stuff like that, it's just them giving you your opinion, but you're not allowed to like give your opinion back in the comment section. And I think people are starting to catch on to that, because apparently there's been like a 20% drop in trust, and like the trust of the mainstream media has just been dropping in regardless anyways. But I mean, we're at a point now where like this is just, it's beyond programming, it's beyond a cultural Marxist attack, and a lot of people have just kind of gone too far with it, and I think the UN's going to fail with this. But at the same time, I do believe that it is working to some scale. It's working on the younger generation. And what I mean by this is, unfortunately, like, economically, it's going to be hard. It's not the same as, like, baby boomers, where they had no competition on the global market when all the other markets were pretty much bombed out. So, we had that, like, great boom of economic prosperity in just North America and the West, pretty much Western world in general. But it's gotten to a point now where it's impossible for, if a kid to get out of high school, usually, just doing like the basic things, and like instead of going to college, going to like work a labor job or something like that, where he doesn't need as much schooling or whatnot, and making like a decent amount of work. I mean, you can do that if you're doing it from trades now, but the thing about that is that there's not a whole lot of people that see trade schools as like as what they want to do with their life. A lot of the newer generation now, there's many different gigs, there's many different switching of majors and interests and student loans and career changes and stuff like that. So it's kind of, it is hard for them than what it was compared to previous generations, but at the same time there hasn't been that will. And there's been a lot of different aspects of things. The educational, there used to be a time where we valued dialectic, where there was like a focus on the objective, trying to find what actually is, using empirical evidence or even just good debate from different perspectives, and unfortunately that was the sign of classical liberalism, and that's been completely destroyed. It's been completely to the point where now you're just, anything that you don't agree with the mob, you are branded a right-wing, Nazi or a racist or some shit like that. It's ridiculous. I mean, that's the thing, is that's what I like about the whole, like, even, like, left and right libertarians. I mean, like, even voluntarists and, like, like Rika, the hopeful voluntarist. Like, I like, every now and then, she releases some really funny videos, and I like watching that because, like, it does make me realize, yeah, okay, all government, for the most part, most part, a little Freudian slip there, is pretty much use of force and theft. If it's not being, especially if it's not being used towards, if there's no representation whatsoever in it. I mean, if people decide to get together and be like, hey, let's pitch some money together to fix the roads or whatnot, and people in a libertarian society want to do that, then that's their choice. I mean, the thing is though is that it's like I said, it's hard getting regular people to see that past that left right thing, because they'll be like, oh well, what if you try to even explain to them, like even with the Tim Moen libertarians, which hey, I give them their credit. They tried to do what they could. I like the one. What was it, like the two federal elections ago? They were the motto they came up with, I think, was they want like gay married couples to be able to protect their marijuana crops with AR-15s. This is just something like that just kind of, because it's something that when you think about it kind of blows that whole kind of left-right prerogative that's what CBC pretty much has everyone brainwashed into. And the sad part of it is that they have all the funding now that's getting made to bail out all these failing institutions, because a lot of people are getting sick of it. It's not the CBC that it was in the 90s or whatnot, where they were playing like Littlest Hobo. Now Littlest Hobo would probably be like racist or whatnot, or like speciesist or some shit. They'd find some way to like make it into like, it's like, oh yeah, I see this mostly white dog, it's getting all these handouts from it'll be like some sort of like socialist complaint about it or whatnot, or but like it's okay for them to have like kids opinion shows where they're freaking out at freaking J.K. Rowling for not being trans friendly enough or whatnot. It's like, it's a show for 6-year-old kids, for crying out loud. And then they did that other thing with what was it, with the CBC, where they're doing the stupid how do you approach your dad if he if he shows something on Facebook that like a conspiracy theory that this COVID-19 was made in a laboratory and escaped from China that way, and it's like, fuck off, bitch, because even like the US government and the Chinese government itself have came out and been like, yeah, okay, it probably came from us. We sorry, but not really. Fuck you, America. Because that's pretty much what they fucking acted like. Let's be honest. I'm embellishing it a little bit, and probably not gonna make Susan Wojcicki's friends list anytime soon, but I'm okay with that. Yeah, it's ridiculous. And then there's the whole I've even been watching like Leafy, and Leafy's awesome, because I have to say, way back in the day when he was doing his videos, it was funny to watch. It was just nice to see something that just breaks from the monotonous. See, I like people who call out hypocrites. And I mean, in one way or form, I guess in the end, we're all kind of technically somewhat hypocritical. But I mean, like, here I am, I'm a libertarian who, I like different, opinions, and even conservatives and stuff like that. I'm starting, I started on like a path 6-7 years ago, where I just realized that the NDP were like, it was interesting, but at the same time they weren't that third option here in Canada. I mean, you got to understand that they had guys from Comer that were actually part of the Bank of Canada lawsuit, where they wanted to take back the printing of our own currency, but then they dismissed it on some bullshit technicality with Rocco Galati, that high tier, I guess, political lawyer or whatnot. So I guess he was, they got really close to at least having some attention. But then the CBC did the bare minimum of reporting on it, because they didn't want to let people know that, all this money that we're printing is getting compounded interest, and we're paying every dollar that's made. It has a bit of debt attributed to it, so we're never going to be able to pay off all the debt we owe, and just how the rest of the world, what isn't $300 trillion of debt, and we owe that to who? What, the reptilians? Just joking. No. Hey, there's people out there, you go down those there's definitely, see, this is why I kind of like the whole idea of the fact that I don't know, the political elite or whatnot, there's some weird shit going down, because there's when you really look at it, there's a lot of pedophilia and protecting pedophiles, and I mean, it's one of those things where you get accused of oh, you're just projecting, or you're just looking for pedophiles where there's no pedophiles and whatnot. But when you actually look at the whole kind of Prince Andrew, that whole thing with his history, and knowing Epstein, I don't know, it's a lot of people are that's what I like about the death of Epstein, and it's kind of a sick and morbid, kind of twisted kind of thing. But it has people who are like, even on the left, that are like, they think Trump did it. I mean, like, and then there's people on the right think the Clintons did it, and there's like people like globally that think maybe the royal family did it. It's definitely like, if they were gonna remake the movie Clue in 2020, they should do it based on Jeffrey Epstein. Even if they don't want to get sued and just do like a fictional thing, I would pay money to. I'd probably be the only Hollywood movie I would actually pay money to see right now. Oh my god, it's one of those ones that at least kind of bring people together, But it seems like a lot of people are kind of in war mode. It's there's definitely a polarization, or I guess a quickening, as the Highlander would say. There can only be one. And hopefully it doesn't go to that. But I mean, it's it's getting to that point. And that's the whole thing about like the whole libertarian thing is, conservatives, they don't mind kicking ass. They're ready to kill a commie for mommy. But at the same time, it's like, that's just going to start off more craziness and feed into the kind of like globalist narrative. But at the same time, it's like, cultural Marxism has completely infested every single aspect of society, and they've done it in such a way where it's hard to fight back without being called racist or getting censored, or having some celebrity get all pissed off, and then they send their millions of fucking mob haters to piss you off or whatnot. That's one of the things. It's just like, social media has kind of been used as like this technocratic control grid now, that they're trying to be like, they're adding this whole COVID thing to it too, which is just disturbing as hell, And that's why I like people on the left and the right that are seeing this stuff for what it is. But at the same time, I understand people have their own opinions, and I may not agree with a lot of the stuff there. But I'm one of those people where I like to go to different channels, like Badass Uncle Sam, or like Tim Pool or James Corbett, because like, some of those people, and like Stefan Molyneux, and like Canadian Libertarian, like I was saying, all these other, I've got like 200 some odd channels, that just trying to remember all of them, and like I like to get different people's opinions from different types of walks of life and stuff like that, and that's really kind of the best way to do it, because that way you can kind of see where they're coming from, and whether or not they have animus to the point where they can't really see in other people's side of the issue or whatnot, or whether or not they are willing to talk. I mean, like, it's been kind of interesting. I've been watching a lot of Stefan Molyneux stuff, and it's just been pretty much him, like, debating with communists. I mean, and it's one of those things where it's like, how can you really convince the communists to see the error of their ways? Because a lot of them just kind of see this giant death toll as just like, like human rights, and like, but they won't like acknowledge the fact that denying their like freedoms of movement, and what they can say, what they can think, what they can buy, and all that stuff, and imprisoning them for like wrong think, and going against the government narrative is it's just it's crazy. It really is. It's something to see. And I mean, I think it's pretty much one of those ones where if you're a communist or a Marxist, I mean, I got a giant beard. Do you think I would be kind of more on the lefty side? When I was younger, I have to say I was more into the whole, because I was grown up poor, and like, I always saw like the hypocrisy of shit. So I never really got like the proper, like conservative upbringing. But at the same time, like, I moved around a lot, so I got to like meet a lot of people. So it was kind of cool seeing like, I don't know, I kind of had that like left class kind of communist Marxist kind of resentment built into me. But then I went out and actually like traveled and worked for myself, and just realized that there's a lot of people out there that, as much as you have good intentions, if you have just a couple of horrible people in there that aren't willing to do their share of things, it falls apart completely. And it's one of those ones where like, it makes you realize. I started reading a lot more philosophy, Nietzsche, Tolstoy, which was more like, it's I don't know, there's a lot of different like ways of looking at perspectives and stuff like that. And that's what I kind of like about philosophy, and just like people who are kind of out there in like different political narratives and stuff like that. But I've definitely find that myself, I'm more of anti-authoritarian, center-right leaning libertarian. I mean, I do have a little bit of conservative values, but at the same time, I mean, I used to consider myself a little bit more of a classical liberal the last 10 years, but, this whole shift with everything and making Trump into the devil. I mean, this is ridiculous. Trump has done, more. I think he donated more to the NCAAP or something like that, I think, for the black colleges than Obama ever did. He pretty much did a whole bunch of prison reform. He's done a bunch of different tax breaks where he's given minority business owners a lot of different incentives and stuff like that, and especially in inner cities. And this is crazy. It's ridiculous how they're reacting to this whole situation. I mean, a lot of these areas are in Democratic hellholes, and I hate to say that. I mean, because I'm not a person that likes to take the whole left and the right, especially in the States. Both the left and the right, they've done a whole lot of horrible things, but some, I have to say, more. I mean, I like Rand Paul. And Ron Paul was pretty cool back in those days. Supported that for the whole libertarian thing, but then they started doing with the Gary Johnson thing with the what is Aleppo, and just the weird face he pulled when he was, when he was. You don't have that many different opportunities for press as a libertarian third-party candidate in the States. You got to take that stuff a little bit seriously. You got to take your opportunity and pick it to at least let people know that you're a serious alternative to Donald Trump. But the thing is, this time around, I've seen this meme of the iceberg, and I have to say it's one of the best memes I've seen so far, because it shows an iceberg with a little tip of it, where it doesn't look like a whole lot, but there's a whole bunch of it beforehand, and it shows 2016, and it shows it pretty big or whatnot underneath the water, and then it shows 2020, and it's just the same iceberg, but it's even bigger. And I think a lot of people who are more moderate or whatnot are seeing these riots and are being like, well, I got pretty much two choices. One choice of a party that wants to destroy the entire economy, lock people down for a lot more longer than what the Republicans are doing, because they want free markets and things to open up. Want the party that's going to allow riots to openly happen and violent protests and the abolishment of any kind of security in places that already have ridiculously high crime rates. So that's gonna, calm things down. Apparently the only thing that has dropped because of all this insanity is rapes. But only because they're not reporting it, because they know there's absolutely no chance for them to, it's if it's happening in the process, they're, the police aren't going to show up. So it's one of those things where they have to, traumatically figure out if they want to go and report it the next day or not, which is pretty fucked up, But I mean, if every other crime and every violence and stuff is going up, and what the Seattle police mayor, was it the police mayor or one of the ladies? She was saying how there's video there. I'm sure most people that have probably seen this video or on this channel know what I'm talking about. But she was saying how there was a bunch of calls for on the emergency line of people that were getting raped, and that they weren't able to get units out there, which is just a horrible tragedy. Nobody wants that shit to happen. But in a way it's weird, because you got all these communists, and the funny thing is they can't make up their mind if they're anarchists or communists. So it's the predominant mentality is the communist kind of way of taking things, with the way they kind of don't really respect individual rights at all. It's all about collectivism. But at the same time, they're trying to do this whole oh no, we're an anarcho commune, they're trying to say, oh, it's all. But the thing is, none of it actually works, because it relies heavily on outside donations, I guess capitulation. So I guess we'll see how long the Seattle mayor is gonna, Jenny. I think it's kind of funny how they got the Karen meme, but I think she started the Jenny meme, I guess, because it's, or maybe it's just another variation of Karen. I don't know. I guess I'll have to see. With the evolution of the meme war of 2020, anything is possible. This is the year where, I'm sure things are going to get a little kicked off, heated and crazy for one. And at the very least, we're going to have some spicy memes from the whole thing. So, gonna have to see how that goes, I guess. Hopefully the U.S. doesn't descend into chaos and have a rippling effect that it, destroys a good portion of the Western world. I mean, just look at the fall of Rome and how that was how that went so well for Western Europe. Not too well, I would have to say. But I mean, for people that were trying to break through the oppression, there wasn't any slavery, except it was local warlords that were running things, so there was still slavery. It's funny how, like, history repeats itself multiple times, but people don't realize it. And, like, for me, I do believe that we need to have that objective reasoned debate, and at least having some sort of middle ground that, like, where some sensible policies of the left and some sensible policies on the right, at least there's, like, a middle ground that there used to be. But, like, it's funny, when you listen to, like, the Clintons, in the 90s, they sounded exactly like Trump when he was running in 2016. It just goes to show you how far the window is shifted, and just how much people have turned into this whole cultural Marxist, and the thing is, it's like this cancel culture. That's one of the symptoms from it, and a lot of people obviously see that. And I also like, I look channels that are also into more like comics or, different like entertainment stuff like that, or different kind of cliques, just to kind of get more of a well-balanced thing. I mean, like, my bag's screwed up, so unfortunately I'm for the most part, I'm kind of got more free time on my hands than what I know what to do with, so I spend that time pretty much just like, looking into all kinds of different stuff that interests me, and I think a lot of people need to do that, And it's pretty cool. I like how, like, Chase the Patriot, I like how he's been, like, even though he's got, like, a decent show, like, he's got a really great setup in the States. He lives in, like, the belly of the beast out there in California, yay! And, but, I mean, he's, one of those people that goes and phones into, like, different talking shows as much as he can, and he'll, like, amplify things. Like, he'll get information from other people that are on the stream, and then he'll, like, look into it or whatnot, or go into call-in shows and try to make a point that way. Just doing everything he can to maximize his, like, like, influence, or, to find out, like, especially with the way that news breaks now. I mean, I go upstairs and I'll see, like, breaking news, and it'll just be, like, the death counter for their fake corona things that they've made up with their horrible models, and have been completely wrong, and, completely inflated, and, like, they've changed the entire way they do the system. So in my books, the data is irrelevant from what they say. You can't trust it because, one, the models were erroneous. Two, they're using every death and that's, like, respiratory and saying that it's COVID or possibly COVID related. There's been exposés by many different nurses and doctors, and they've been in the Orwellian crackdown on censorship is just appalling to see how much they are just shutting down anyone on alternative left or right leaning sources, or even, like, non-state, because that's, I mean, like, to say that, every alternative media comes from a left or right narrative is erroneous, because there's plenty of people who are, anarchists, and that's, I like, I like those kind of channels and stuff like that. It's good to get kind of one of their opinions. But the thing is, though, I find, the majority of people, like, the thing about people who are kind of like, all government is theft and use of force and stuff like that. Most people will be like, yeah, but then, obviously there's who will build the roads, stupid thinking, and, the whole kind of, like, trying to get a conservative to think what, like, having a fiscal conservative government with, like, somewhat leftist kind of, social values, like, if they're like, oh, we're gonna legalize that pot, or, like, the left would be like, oh, well, we can't have, like, our socialist, winners and losers for state welfare. We can't have that system. So it's hard to convince people to think outside that fucking really narrow kind of framework, and that's the sad part about humanity. And I think it's one of those ones where, like, we kind of have to wait for something to get really, really bad. That's kind of the way that humanity works, where, it'd be like government collapses, or, like, people aren't getting their checks because, we printed too much or whatnot, or the value of the dollar's gone to shit, or, there's breakdowns in the food supply. Like, there's so many different things that we are doing with this shutdown. And, like, the amount of people that are dying in the fucking second and third world, and like the government isn't even, or the news isn't even making a big thing of that. That should be like number one on the thing. If like we're talking about lefties that say that they care so much about like minorities and like other countries that are like that are I guess that don't have like the the benefits of living in a Western civilization country, that everyone decides to fight everyone else to try to get here for, or illegally get means to come to the West. But then when it comes to like having to face those kind of like to face the music of what it actually is like to be in a civilized Western nation, it's kind of funny, because then it's all of a sudden, oh well, this nation that's so racist and hates you for wanting to come here, which is bullshit. I mean, like, it's ridiculous. And I think it's kind of funny how much race has just been used in general, because like now they're trying to say that like British, like Canada and like historically British okay, obviously there was some colonialism, but at the same time, I mean, like, you can't really judge everything with the same kind of lens. Like, things happened way back then, and I mean, you could say, oh, right, all these people did horrible things, but the good things that they did get completely erased and overridden. So what our next, what are we gonna do? Replace all of the statues out there with like that one chick who shot all those police officers and escaped to Cuba, who's like the leader for Black Lives Matter? Is that what we're gonna choose as our wonderful new arbiters of morality? And the giant monuments built to the accomplishments of people that really didn't fucking deserve it. Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, like, without Winston Churchill, if he was never born, we'd all be goose-stepping and fucking, there'd be a lot less minorities on the planet. But, that's okay, apparently. It's okay to hate on somebody and call them a fascist, the person who actually fought fucking Nazism and fascism. Oh my god, the world's going completely, absolutely crazy. So, I mean, really, at this point, in Canada, all we really can do is just kind of cheer on the people in the States, because they've kind of got a little bit of a chance with this whole fighting globalism. And the funny thing is, when I try telling my friends about whole globalist like policies and how it's all connected and whatnot, they have a hard time believing it. But if you really do your research, I mean, like, the UN's own like agendas, pretty much what they're trying to do with the whole climate change for the last like 20 years and all the other crap they've been trying to get everyone to sign on to, these horrible fucking economy killing deals that just make it easier for certain nations to produce, and it makes it impossible for other nations to produce. So it's a really kind of thing where what they do is they suppress localized regions, and they take the best of those regions and they use that to fund a global thing, so that all that region is doing is like one or a few different service sector things to help this one global government. So that way the collectivized thinking is you're getting the best of everything. It's like the whole kind of as much of a cliche as it is now, the whole Hunger Games sector kind of thing, where you got like the main sector, sucking off all the resources and living luxuriously, while everyone else has to, pay carbon guilt taxes and, kiss black people's feet, because, that's apparently the way that we solve racism now. It's ridiculous. And the whole thing about the whole race issue is that it's really something that, like, it stirs up, like, a lot of tribalism in people, regardless of your political leanings or, where you live in the world. Some places it's definitely it's all about the whole, you're from this area, or you believe this and I believe that kind of thing. And unfortunately, I think we're going to kind of see it come to a head in the West here very shortly with this whole kind of thing. I mean, it's gone to the point now where, people are trying to defend the statues, or then they got the people that are tearing them down. And it's funny how that one guy who, like... Well, I guess the leftists were taking their own statue down. They ended up like in Virginia, I think, was where it happened. The statue was like, they're all partying and whatnot, and like, if a statue was coming down, all right, like, how stupid do you have to be like right underneath it and be like, oh, it's loose. Oh, I think I got about another 10 seconds here. I'm just gonna sit here and just keep looking though. Like I don't know. I mean, it's sad. He's in a coma. I guess, like, hopefully he recovers. But I mean, it ain't looking good when you see the way that thing came down on his head. And at the same time, it's like, I think it's really I don't know. It kind of just shows you how stupid a lot of people have became nowadays. You know, it's like, especially when, what was he thinking? Was he like, oh, there's a giant fucking rock that's about to fall on my face? You know what? Fuck objective gravity. I'm using subjective logic. That's not gonna fall on me. I'm gonna fall on it. Yeah. That's my logic. Don't make any sense. So he's probably in some weird fucking dream world right now, dreaming about how he's like the king of some like Caribbean island, got his hoes and mangoes, and maybe he doesn't want to come back. And at this point, I can't really blame him, but it's still a really stupid fucking decision to decide to stand underneath a freaking statue while they're destroying it. It's ridiculous. But I mean, at the same time, I've been listening to a lot of other people and stuff like that. I don't know. I'm still not sold on the Q. I mean, I just, it's too anonymous. He's led people down too many weird fucking roads that turned out to not be true. It's like Nostradamus talking about the quatrains and shit like that. I just call it Quastradamus or Q-stradamus. I don't know. Sometimes I have good ones, and sometimes they fall flat on their fucking face. I mean, you get what you pay for here, folks. But anyways, you know, it's interesting to see the way things are going. So, I mean, Canada pretty much, like, well, they've taken our right to really own firearms, so I'm at the point now I'm going to have to start getting, like, maybe getting a crossbow or a bow, and hopefully quickly, because, I mean, he's probably eyeing that thing. I think he just started off with all of the list. He just was like, all right, I just need you to give me a little playlist of the sound of every gun, and if it scares me, I'm going to check it off this list. Oh, that was too loud. Too loud. I'm Justin Trudeau. I don't like the sound of that. What hurts my ears? Oh. Somebody get me some milk and magnesia. That's our soy sock Prime Minister Trudeau. Oh, it's funny how he's like not even seeing his wife anymore. But at the same time, Sophie, if you really looked into like her demands and stuff, and like just like how she is as a person, she's just a horrible human being that cares more about her what she looks like to other people. One of those kind of uppity cunts. Like, they didn't even really know the whole con thing. And, like, we're talking about something that, like, screwed him over with, like, an ethics violation that apparently doesn't mean anything anymore in this country, or at all to people on the left, because it's okay if the left does it. You know, that's what I think is ridiculous, because you can have Trudeau doing blackface 3 times, you know, like, groping a female fucking reporter. You know, he paid off hush money, like some odd $1 million to some girl that he allegedly groped when he was a fucking substitute teacher, when he got, like, fired all of a fucking sudden. And it's crazy how we had to rely on the U.S. sources of news to find this out. But, of course, we can't say anything about here in Canada, because, God forbid, we offend or hurt anyone's fifis. That's what Canada's fucking turned into. This nation of pussified wimps that love their little commercials of these fucking victimizing ads saying, we know that things are horrible right now, but when things get back up and you all get vaccinated with the vaccine and you all start dying from the fucking unproven, untested fucking regulations from it, but that's okay because we're here for you. You can shop at us. We'll allow you to go to our premises and you can somewhat spend your money, even though we would prefer if you would just do it at home, maybe have Amazon take over everything in your life, and just, you know, you just sit there and you watch your Netflix and you just do you. You know, you don't have to exercise. You don't have to worry about that lump in your chest that, you know, may turn into something. You just do not matter. Just relax and just watch that Netflix. You know, I mean, I hear you can, you know, like, obviously the selection of things are getting narrower and narrower because, God forbid, something might be deemed racist. But, you know, there's going to be some videos that are approved by the state and by their technocratic overlords, ones that usually promote, you know, values that we don't completely, understand or have never worked before in Western civilization, but we're going to make it so that every war movie is the government being corrupt or, stupid bullshit like that. And you just sit there and you put your Black Lives Matter avatar to 3 black squares, apparently. And that is how we solve racism. And, when a terrorist, blows something up, we put our avatars and our flags to the color of that nation, and that just makes everyone feel good about themselves, and it just goes away. According to the media, apparently. I mean, that's just how it is if you watch the mainstream media. And I think people are starting to catch on, like I've said before a couple of times, but like I'm explaining this in different ways, and mostly it's because of the way that I've seen people in like the grocery stores and whatnot, and at the point now, like, yeah, you get some of them that are wearing masks, but I've had a couple conversations with people, and I think a lot of people are just kind of getting, because they did polls with, I guess, the Ontario Conservatives, and a lot of people are just completely unhappy with the way that Doug Ford isn't really fighting for businesses, because, I mean, as a populist, he's going to be getting those kind of backlashes, even on a provincial scale. I mean, they won with a landslide, but the way that he's been kowtowing and not, looks like he's not really been. I mean, he called people that wanted to go back to work and that were saying, listen, we can't keep relying on these big government handouts. And, that's another conversation, is the CERB has been a big thing. Most of the libertarians completely against it. I'm definitely... At the same time, I understand why they took it, I mean, obviously there's been a lot of people that shouldn't have took it, but at the same time, you just shut down the entire economy. You've made it completely impossible for people to run businesses. And then we have, like, U.S. and the Canadian state, like, in certain places, they're even doing, like, stings. They're going on, like, Craigslist for people that are looking like, hey, do you need a haircut or whatnot? And they're, like, doing stings on people and finding them and shit like that. And, businesses that are trying to stay alive, and they're still limited to what they can be for capacity. And these 4-stage phase things, it's just, it's nothing we've ever seen before. So, in a way, I can understand why people panic. We're in a socialist country. People are going to be like, well, the government can fucking print out money and stuff like that. And obviously, it's sad because libertarians are right. It is them pretty much taking the work of other people, and at the same time where the well is running dry pretty fast for the money that we're actually getting. I mean, taxation, good luck with that. I mean, so many businesses, what they say, if this thing goes for as long as Trudeau wants it, I mean, he was originally talking about 18 months, and everybody was like, even here in Canada, didn't believe it. But we have a globalist soy boy, and it's sad to me because I hope people realize come next federal election just how badly he has fucked us over. And how badly he completely kowtowed to the authoritarianism. I was talking to a buddy of mine, because I have a lot of different interests. Like right now, I'm playing an online game, and one of my friends in that is actually a teacher in I think like near Amsterdam or whatnot, or like guess he's Dutch anyways. And he was saying how they've actually they're going back to school to finish off the year that they weren't able to finish. They're already in places where, in Europe, they're actually trying to get some schools back. But other places, I hear the UK is actually really shut down really hard. And that's kind of sad because you got Boris Johnson. And I mean, there was that huge scandal with the guy who came up with the stats, going to send his wife over. I mean, obviously... Now, if we were in a real kind of, let's say if anyone's watched the movie Contagion, I know I'm kind of going a little off on a tangent here, but this is what I'm trying to say for if we if things were as bad as Contagion, where there was actually a Spanish flu virus that had the same transmissibility as the COVID, because I think that's what scares the most people is the transmission and the transmissibility of it, how the fact that it spread so fast. But I think a lot of people already had it, or have it, and asymptomatic, and it still hasn't. The amount of hospitalizations have decreased in a lot of different places, and it looks like we're starting to kind of get to that point where it's not going to be that much of an issue. And I mean, I liked how Infowars, covered it way back, and there was plenty of different places and alternative media too that was covering it, and just how crazy it was getting. But anyways, like, imagine if there was something that bad where a lot of people died from it, like that would shut down. Like, that would be a legitimate shutdown because people would be too afraid. The police would be afraid to go and do their damn job because they're the ones having to deal with all these fucking rioters and all this, increase in upticks in time in crime because people think that, we're at the worst possible time economically, let's kick our community while we're down because that's a fucking bright idea. I mean, what are they gonna do when they're fighting each other for fucking 60 when like there's turf wars over the 69 fucking 69-cent can store, like it gets to a point where you can only burn so many things down before you've got absolutely fuck all in your area. You're just fighting over the basic necessities of life. Like, oh, that guy's got screws. Oh, really? Well, we need them. Let's get them. Because ain't no. What do they think that they're just gonna be like? The government's just gonna be like, you know what? We're so damn racist. You're right. We're just gonna spend all this money to rebuild it again. And hopefully you won't burn it down again. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Say no more. Who's going to take that risk? What insurance company is going to be like, you know what? Yeah, this entire place keeps getting burnt down. I want to imagine what insurance rates are like in Baltimore right now. Probably not too good. I would hate to be in Jake from State Farm right now because he would be getting his ass whooped. I'm Jake from State Farm. Please stop beating my skull in. Black Lives Matter. Black Lives Matter. Oh my god. Hey, Jake from State Farm. You about to get fucked up. Flo's getting raped in the corner. It's just fucking horrible scene. Oh shit! I'm gonna stop this. This is getting bad for me. So, like I said, this is the ranting. You're on a journey with me, and it's more like a boat ride to hell, and we're like at least six miles from shore. So you're gonna have to bear with me. But yeah, no, it's just been crazy. So I've been doing things like I've been donating to a couple channels and stuff like that. Like Dan Dix, I definitely felt like I had to shoot some money. Like, I mean, everyone's kind of like, there's been a lot of people that have been like freaking on him, but I think that's just like counter intelligence, maybe like even some possible five-eye skullduggery going on there. Because, I mean, the guy got freaking attacked and robbed. I mean, that's one of the one things where like you show that footage of you going to a peaceful protest, apparently the peaceful protests that we call them in Canada and the leftist media, because they're hedging their bets right now. He goes there, and the funny thing is this guy's like not a statist at all. He's not an authoritarian. He's an anarchist for the most part. I think maybe voluntarist, libertarian. I don't know. He's a pretty cool guy. I've been watching him for years, and I like how he goes and goes to Bilderberg and whatnot and raises funds that way and tries to expose the whole kind of all the people there, which is kind of interesting. I think this, like, to me it kind of feels like this whole global shutdown and whatnot, like. Anybody following the alternative media and like Radowski and Dan Dix and all the different like even that French guy who's been like following Bilderberg for years or whatnot. I can't remember his name at the top of my head, but he was in like Endgame. There's a lot of different people have been following Bilderberg because it's been getting more popular and whatnot. And I mean, last year, like, they were really secretive about everything. So I mean, like, out of all the times that they've managed to be able to get people on camera for Bilderberg and find out who's attending and whatnot, last year they were really it was like, I think, announced very last minute, like 2 weeks before it came out, before they had the thing, and then it was like very secretive, and they were very Orwellian and authoritarian for anybody that was covering it. And so I was kind of thinking to myself, man, maybe they are planning something for 2020. I mean, I had like this feeling in my gut, and I've been watching Alex Jones. I mean, okay, like I have said many different times, people are like, watching this may agree or may not agree with what they say or whatnot. I like David Knight because he's pretty consistent. He's like, he'll fucking grill Trump's ass over the fire if he does anything that, and he's right. It's good to keep that kind of libertarian thing, so you don't get stuck in this like right wing, because I mean, like, not so much as like right wing, but like this like completely authoritarian kind of aspect of the right, where you kind of get into like this like hero worship, you're like, Trump's awesome or whatnot. I mean, like, yeah, I do like what he's done, but like recently I don't agree with the shutdown. I wish, like, if I was in his shoes, I just know I would probably do things a lot more, in favor of what the base wants. I mean, he got elected to kick some ass and be Andrew Jackson, but right now he's kind of being more like more like Hamilton, and I really don't like the idea of the fact that a lot of people on the right are letting him get away with things that they would never have let Obama, get away with, pretty much. If he was going to suggest bringing in like militarized police or whatnot, they'd be like, Obama's taking all our guns, it's civil war, it'd be, the Republicans would be all, but the funny thing is that you see like with Trump's election, I mean, the Republicans, for example, for the longest time, they were always like pro-gun, they said they were pro-Second Amendment or whatnot, and like, for like proper wars and not like the ones where they're going like to, everybody's dying for, like you're seeing with like Iraq and all that shit. But there used to be a time where like Republicans were more for like I wouldn't say like beforehand, because a lot of them, before this Groyper and I guess like the Red Elephants movement and other people too that have kind of like that were against the whole Charlie Kirk thing. I mean, like, there's so many different aspects to the U.S. politics, especially how it shifted and how the Republican Party has like completely changed its course for more of a populism kind of thing. But it's great because there's been more of a question about whether or not we want to, foreign intervention, mass immigration, because that was a huge issue. I mean, a lot of people who are libertarian in the States, they had no problem with absolutely no borders, because there's a lot of leftists, kind of Stosselite leaning kind of libertarians and like voluntarists and stuff like that. And I like to listen to all of them. I just like, there's certain things I don't agree with, and like I see that there's like different problems with, but it's at the same time, it's like when you're talking about something like an alternative to the left-right paradigm, it's like what would actually work in theory and in practice, because some people, it's just like trying to get society in general, and like the way to do it would be to like completely take over the educational institutions again and try to put them back to what they were before, where they were based on objective values, where you used the Socratic method and figured out things that way, But we don't have that anymore. We have complete subjectivity, cultural Marxism, postmodernist thought that's just ruined everything. You've got this whole feminist thing that's just kind of ruined relationships and made it so that, plus the dating apps and a bunch of other, there's plenty of different things that if you just kind of like look into the entertainment culture too, like we glorify, we glorify violence and we glorify a lot of things because we're trying to like replace it with like kind of like ways that we used to do things tribalistically beforehand, way back in the day. And that's just it's just kind of remnants. It's just turned into like this empty vestiges of these celebrities that a lot of people just worship. I mean, for me, I more appreciate individuals, as much as I can. I do have some collectivist, like leanings in me, especially when that whole kind of debate came to, whether or not they should send, the National Guard or something in there to remove the people in Seattle. I mean, hey, yeah, I understand. You do that, you make them martyrs. There could be a lot of people, innocent people that end up dying or whatnot. And, it's a horrible thought to think that might be something that could possibly kick into like a civil war or whatnot, or start the kind of thing at that. But at the same time, like you can't help but as a libertarian see that the fact that these people are not being democratic whatsoever or appreciating any of the rights or the non-aggression principle that are running things, and that everybody who like that was living there, hey, there may have been some people that were all for it at first and were, making their little Twitter friends and their Facebook friends, getting a little kudos brownie points on social media because they always like to do thing in theory and never actually in real life or practice, which is one of the downsides of the online social media world. Like, this is pretty much the extent of what I do for YouTube, for the mainstream ones. Like, I like to go on BitChute and other stuff like that, but I've been most lately just watching stuff and supporting other people that are doing better. Just because I'm not putting a whole lot of effort into this, and like I could, but at the same time I'd be fighting an uphill battle, and I think we're all fighting an uphill battle at one point. I guess people call me a pussy or whatnot, but at the same time, like, I'm limited to what I can do. I mean, I've done things in my area to try to get attention, and like I've done, like, I wear shirts and like, hats from places and wear stuff that I support and whatnot, like the PBC, even though people aren't really too happy with Max right now. But you know what? I have to say, out of all of the parties, he's one of the only ones that is really against the UN. Like, if you really look at, like, the best chance that we have at, like, keeping Canada, I mean, the PPC just kind of seemed like a better option to me. I mean, and I like how Maxine has actually been doing, like, if you go to the PPC on YouTube, their channel, he's actually been, like, sitting down and, like, talking about recent issues and events and stuff like that. He's actually been using the platform to talk about what he wants to do specifically. And I think the thing about individualists and people who are kind of libertarian-leaning or, even, like, right-leaning or whatnot, and heck, even people who are left-leaning or people who are just anarchists and are just sick of the bullshit from both sides, I mean, I see a lot of that when you look at different alternative media viewpoints. But at the same time, like, there's things I agree with and I don't agree with. But, I like listening to it because it's, it's just the mainstream media is at the point where there's, like, almost nothing really. It's all just opinions on what is going on. It's not really any kind of, like, investigative journalism, Like, we used to have, we kind of have, like, the Fifth Estate, which was, like, a CBC show. And, what they did is, way back in the day, they would, like, go after anyone, any kind of, like, weird kind of, they were one of the ones that covered, out of any organization in the media, that covered the most, was the CBC for the Fifth Estate investigation of the whole MK Ultra thing, what they used to do to people in Montreal, when they were doing the weird experiments and the sleep deprivation shit and all that stuff that, the media and, like, all the establishments tried to say for the longest time never happened or didn't exist, but it actually did. So they actually did a really good, like, expose for some things, but they've gotten to a point now where it's just completely taken over, really. And there's a few people apparently that will debate, but the CBC, in the most part, like, I've seen a couple local reporters, and, like, when I've talked to them, because, like, there's been a couple times where they've done things locally here, and I happened to see them, and I was just, like, having to have a conversation. One of them, they had me do, like, a thing when I was going to the food bank at one point, and that was when I was, like, really hurting, and I was just kind of talking to them about other stuff, and that was, like, I think 4 or 5 years ago or whatnot, and it was interesting because, like, they kind of realized that there's been, like, a shift with, like, the whole Trump election, because at the time that's what it was mostly about. I was talking to them about what they thought about Trump and whatnot, and like, some of the reporters were actually saying, like, the one lady there, like, she was kind of like, well, I'm obviously, like, a leftist and I don't like what he's said about the whole pussy thing and all that stuff, and she's all saying how she like is for women's rights, and I'm like, yeah, I understand, I get that. But at the same time, I was like, like, saying, well, can you see, like, how a lot of the, him calling out the fake media, and how there's been all, like, these Podesta email leaks, and there's been, like, these weird connections to Epstein, and I was talking about that with her and stuff like that, and she was like, yeah, no, it's weird how there's, like, stuff like that when you really look at the top, she said, she doesn't really see it herself because she's just fresh out of, like, college or whatever, like, liberal arts media studies degree she's going for in the media, and but she, at the same time, she wasn't, like, completely brainwashed. But now it's like they have to put everything in a narrative. They're saying that, like, white supremacists are, like, all abundant in Canada now. Everyone's a white supremacist, and they're all they're all out to turn you into Nazis, even though like almost everybody here in Canada is against Nazis. Like, I don't think I've actually seen any Canadian Nazis. Well, in the 90s and yeah, late 90s, there was like the thing where they tried to come up here, but it didn't really work, I guess. I don't know. I don't really follow that stuff myself, but I mean, unfortunately, they do have that replacement migration argument. And that's really the only argument that they have. And if you try to frame everything into a racial kind of connotation, then really what you're doing is just engaging in that whole kind of tribalistic bullshit in itself. And then, it turns into that whole kind of thing where it's like you get called racist, and then it turns other people against you. And then look what they've done. Like, take Stefan Molyneux, where he was talking about like actual statistics and stuff from IQ things. Like those are things that are unfortunately facts. Like the fact that Somalians have a low IQ in general. But that's usually when you look at the product of a shitty and like collapsed government where nobody's giving them proper education and stuff like that. Like, obviously there's going to be like statistics like that are gonna show that kind of stuff. But that doesn't necessarily, and he said many different times that doesn't necessarily mean that has to be like the generalization for everything. He wants the betterment of of different cultures and stuff like that. And he wants them to live like the best life they possibly can. And, he's a person that genuinely cares. But, like, if you were to listen to the mainstream media here in Canada, they would be like, oh, he's all about racial statistics and stuff like that. And he's a secret racist, and he just doesn't like to say it or whatnot. And, like, all these people are, like, listening to him, and, like, he's a popular, thing. And, like, they'll do all these insidious things to, like, try to huff up his name as, like, some sort of, like, and, like, the Wikipedia thing is just completely taken over by leftists now, so that they're completely not showing him in, like, any kind of, like, good way whatsoever. And this is the same thing with Jordan Peterson. I mean, the guy's actually, like, he is more classically, like, left than most, and, like, even, like, was a lot of people were kind of giving him criticism because he had, like, where he was working with, like, UN groups at one point, because he's in the academic circle, so that's usually where they travel the most, where he can do things. And I mean, unfortunately, there's been a bit of a down. He's hit a bit of a hump in his kind of life right now, I guess, with his wife, the whole cancer thing, the whole. I guess his daughter had a divorce with her husband or whatnot, and things like they apparently it was an amicable splitting, but every divorce is kind of tragic in its own sort of way, and. I guess he's kind of going through a little bit because he had to go to rehab because he was, I guess he got addicted to some of those opiates or whatnot. But I mean, that's the thing about, when you're in the academic field and psychology and stuff like that, there's usually a lot of access to, prescription drugs and stuff like that. So it's always one of those things you have to worry about, unfortunately. And I guess, in a way, it kind of like, because a lot of his past two books, pretty much, Maps of Meaning and 12 Rules for Life, people are kind of saying in a pragmatism, sort of like practical sort of way, that, oh, well, him kind of like, getting addicted to drugs and stuff like that, how he's talking about clean up your room and stuff like that, and how people are kind of like arguing, like, how can you really say that you can clean up your own room if your room is like, if someone drives like a fucking car through your bedroom or whatnot, like, how do you deal with something like that? And obviously him having to kind of do some soul searching and getting addicted and having to deal with the pain with his wife and all that stuff. I don't know what's going on, whether or not his wife's okay, and I hope everything good for him and his family, and stuff like that. But it goes to show that, like, how, like, you can go through a really kind of rough thing and it can just completely floor you, and hopefully he comes out of it and he's ready to do his thing. But he's a guy who pretty much is against cultural Marxism, but at the same time he's against any kind of fascism and Nazism too. So it's like, the media can't. They tried so hard to paint him as like this, like, this like incel champion of of woman hating, and because he said something for like about a year he was going on this like tour where all these leftist like reporters were trying to like obfuscate or like change and make everything sound that like more sinister than he was just like going on basic psychological biology and also like pretty much stuff that's been like statistically proven many different times over and over again, because that's his like intellectual circles that he travels in. And all of his there was a few things that he said that was a little weird, but I mean, I think at that point he was just kind of getting bored. Like when he said when I guess there was one interview where someone was like, "Oh, should we allow women to wear makeup?" And he's kind of thought of it in a debatable sort of way. He's thinking, hey, I mean, when you think about it, like a woman, she uses like makeup on her lips to show that she's, like from a biological standpoint, the red and the stuff like that, the more attractive clothes is meant to, attract the male gaze and stuff like that. And he was saying, well, technically, like are these sexual things gonna, if you sexualize things, it's definitely gonna make the more of more cases of like sexual harassment and stuff like that, because like, and there's definitely stuff to be said, but and it doesn't mean in a way that means that like everybody now all of a sudden, and that's the thing, is they take generalizations, or they'll take like when people debate and they use other people's or different forms of like looking at the problem, or looking at things, and they say it in a way that's kind of like, well, it's more demonstrative to show that like whether or not the idea would work, and whether or not there's any kind of absurdity to the validity of what they're trying to say, and that's how you kind of like work things out in a kind of mental math kind of problem that way in a debate. But that was taken as like, oh, he thinks that all women shouldn't wear makeup, and he's a chauvinist, and he thinks they all should wear, like the same uniform and whatnot, and just all this crap that they tried throwing in there. It was just ridiculous. But anyways, wow, I've been ranting for an hour and 20 minutes again. I kind of do these things where I end up doing these for like an hour to 2 hours, and you guys just kind of have to hold in with me, and hopefully I made a few of you laugh. I don't know, just how it is. But I think I covered most of the stuff there. I guess gonna have to see how Escape from Alcatraz plans out, and whether or not Bikers for Trump come down and start whooping some ass. But at the same time, I don't know, it would be kind of interesting to see a bunch of bikers fighting a bunch of soy boys. I mean, it's gonna be kind of a bloodbath. But at the same time, you can't really say that, because like, I guess that guy Raz from Chaz and his like little bodyguard thing, he's been like giving out random rifles to people, and at the same time I'm kind of like, well, I don't know, because I'm all for people owning weapons to defend themselves, but in this kind of scenario it seems like it's going to be defending themselves against bikers and turning it into possibly a civil war and bloodshed. And I guess but the thing is, it's like they're taking all these donations from the city because they can't possibly run things for themselves. The gardens were just a joke, and they've got like no running water there. They've had people on there that have actually kind of showed just like how much garbage has been packed up, and how the city's having to take like these giant dumpsters of garbage because people are living there now. And it's just turned into this thing where they don't have proper waste management plans. They don't really have a proper really anything aside from security. And even then, they're like different groups that are chasing other people down and having to like get permission if they want to like tag things. It's like, wow, I didn't know you had to get permission slips in the revolution. Wow, it must be really hard. You're all that freedom and anarchy that you thought you were gonna get. Just not happening for those guys that were anarchy and getting their face smashed. You're not authorized by the Raz and the Chaz. Alcatraz. You got spares, Mr. Raz. Running that Alcatraz. Oh my god. But yeah, because a warlord completely has your best interests in mind. Brought to you by CNN. Peaceful protesting by the most trusted name in news. But yeah, so that's usually how that goes. But anyways, I guess the best advice I could say is to save up and prepare for the worst pretty much at this point. I mean, it's nice to try to convince, I would like to convince people out there in the world not to, take to the streets every time Black Lives Matter tells you to do it, and actually look at the fact that people are dying on a regular basis and the shutdown and all this crap. Oh my god, you guys know what I'm talking about. But it's just kind of sad to see just this like weird kind of way that we've just kind of been compelled into this. Like I've been like wanting to go outside, but at the same time I'm just like, why bother? It's like I would love to go swimming. You know, I can't do that. That was my thing. I was losing so much weight. I was regulating my blood sugar. Now I'm having to fucking watch what I eat again because of all this shit. But I haven't really been doing that either, so that's not a good sign. I don't know. I think a lot of that has to do with depression, though. I've been trying. But anyways, you guys, don't let it get too crazy, and don't let the isolation get to you, because it's sad. And try to go out more. Try to do what you can. You know, I mean, I've been putting stickers out in certain spots and doing like certain kind of outreach and going to other people's channels and all that crap. But you know, what can you do, really? You know, it's more like waiting for the collapse, like I said before. And hopefully we do make it out of this. I mean, if we do make it out of this into like 2021, and there's not a civil war, and like China hasn't like started a war with India, and like North Korea hasn't done some crazy fucking shit, because his like sister's probably in charge now, and she looks crazy as fuck. I bet she'd be a sexy bang in bed, though. I'm not gonna lie. Like for her to have an orgasm, I bet you at least 2 fucking virgins got to get their throat slit. She's got that look on her face. She's into some weird shit. Like gonna be like sitting there, and be like, what the fuck? And just when you're about to die, that's when you have the orgasm. But anyways, I will talk to you guys later. And keep on rocking in the free world for as long as it stays free. And Alright guys, keep on rocking in the free world. Peace!